Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know where everyone's at.
Well, for once, you didn't have to call me.
And it looks like I may have to call my wife.
Okay.
She's in the living room, but I can tell she's not logged in.
Well, here comes Ed. Hey, Ed. Oh, here comes Merv. Hey, Merv.
Hi, Merv.
I always forget I'm muted. How is
No. So, are you doing a lot of rehearsals right now?
that? Not a lot, just on Zoom, which is challenging.
Oh.
But yeah.
Do you have more solos, or are you doing duets or group?
We're doing lots of group numbers, but there's a lot of solos. Yeah. So.
Oh, I'm excited.
Oh.
What solo are you? What are you going to do? What's some of the songs so I know I can recognize them? Do I know them?
It's a surprise.
Oh,
You'll know them.
right.
You'll know them.
You think so? Okay.
Yeah. There aren't that many Japanese songs. But RB will know.
Yes, he knows all those. His poor little brain is just like so much stuff in there.
So much unnecessary information trapped in my brain.
That's what people say to me. Oh, you have a good memory. I'm like, well, yeah, it's all iranai koto.
Iranai koto. Merv, I need help. Can you tutor me? I have like these little cards I have to do.
Kawaiso.
Oh, it's so hard. I can't remember these things. I think I'm too old. I'm too old to learn.
Never too old. Never too old. So Kelly's running the show, huh? Wow.
Hey, Val.
So if there's any mistakes, you can blame them on me.
That's nice.
Maybe we'll wait a minute or so, see if
okay.
How everyone's.
Patty, the new washer arrived today. I ordered it like forever ago, back ordered washer dryer.
Yeah.
And when they were putting it all together, they they crushed the dryer, the top of it. So I have to get a new top.
Oh no. It's not one thing, it's
across the
another.
river and beat them on a rock, so close to Sacramento River.
Yeah, if it's not one thing, it's another, huh?
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's 7:02, so maybe Sensei, can I ask you to go ahead and start our session?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you everybody for coming. So please join me in Gassho. Please put your palms together. Namo Amida Butsu.
Namo
Amida Butsu.
Namo
Namo Amida Butsu.
Namo Amida Butsu. Namo.
Yeah, it's the end of February. Today is February 28th, so we are, yeah, we finished 1/6 of 2023 already. So I hope everybody's doing well. And I enjoyed Eitaikyo service online and what was it? BCA talent show. I heard a beautiful singing voice of Marv. So it was really, yeah, it was really nice to watch the show.
Since I liked your hair.
I still have it right here. Yeah. So today is fifth classes of sixth, lecture series. So we are, getting close to the end of this series. I know, I should have started from kind of introductory classes, but I really wanted to talk about 30 verses on representation only by Bodhisattva Vasubandhu for many years. So, well, it's online, so probably it's okay to talk about it. And, if people don't understand, that's fine too. I don't understand it either, so, right? But, representation only theory is really useful in my daily life too. So today's verses 20 and 20 through 25, this is really important verses within the 30 verses. So I hope you enjoy it. Then what is these verses about, 20 through 25, is that they discusses the three nature and three non-nature. And these two are basically the same thing, but it's like looking at the coin from one side or the other and talking about the same thing, but from different perspective. So when we stand on the viewpoint that all the phenomena exist, then it becomes the three nature. If we stand on the viewpoint or perspective that all phenomena lacks the self-nature or emptiness or sunyata, then that becomes the three non-nature. So this is what verses 20 through 25th. Personally, just talking about the three non-nature are a little difficult to comprehend. But three nature made me think about the distance between myself and the Buddha. And this actually leads to how I appreciate Jodo Shinshu teaching. So this is really important section on 30 verses of representation only. 20 through 22nd verses, it talks about the three natures. So let me, read all these three verses first, and then I will explain about each verses or three nature. Okay. So, verse 20, the original said, Yu, hi, henge, henge, shu, ju, motsu, shi, henge, shou, shu, u, ji, shou, mu, shou, u. And this is my translation. Through the various kinds of self-calculation, we think widely, thinking using the words. The nature of calculating and attaching to the imagination is that we think as if the figure is outside of ourselves as true reality, but it is only the figure of our attachment to the self-calculation, and there is no concrete substance outside of the self. And BDK translation said, because of whatever imagination, such and such a thing is imagined. This imagined nature, parikalpita svabhava, does not exist. And then last house translation, due to that and that everywhere schematizing proliferates things, the self-nature of this everywhere schematizing what is grasped is non-existent. There is a typo right here. It should be this. And then Ben Connelly's translation. So now I have full translation. Whatever thing is conceptualized by whatever conceptualization is of an imaginary nature, it does not exist. So this is what verse 20 is about. And then verse 21. 他き事象分別縁象象縁上実応非常音理前象 And this is the verse 21. And this is my translation. All things which are created, in other words, the nature of occurring by depending on others, is caused by the dependent origination. The perfected and real nature appears when the one leaves the imaginary nature and see the nature of occurring by depending on others as is. And BDK translation. The nature that is dependent on others, paratantra svabhava, is discrimination born of conditions. The perfected nature, parinisspanna svabhava, is the external privation of the former nature from that dependent nature. And this is Dan Lasthouse translation. The dependent on others to arise self-nature is produced by discriminative conditions. The perfectly accomplished real nature is when that is permanently remote and detached from the previous nature. And then a Ben Connelly translation. The other dependent nature is a conceptualization arising from conditions. The complete realized nature is the other dependent. Nature's always being devoid of the imaginary. So this is the verse 21. Verse 22. 法しよえた、ひいひふい、尿無常等症、ひふけんしひ。So this is verse 22. And this is my translation. Therefore, the perfected and real nature and the nature of occurring by depending on others are neither different nor non-different. This is just as the relationship of impermanence as fact and impermanence as truth. Unless we see the truth of perfected and real nature, we cannot see the nature of occurring by depending on others. And BDK translation. Therefore, this perfected nature and the dependent on others are neither different nor non-different. Like the nature of impermanence, etc., one not perceived, the other is not perceived. And then Lasthouse translation. Therefore, this and dependent on others are neither different nor not different, like impermanent thing, etc., and their abstracted nature, impermanency. It is not the case that you don't see this and yet can see that. And Ben Connelly translation. Thus, it is neither the same nor different from the other dependent, like impermanence, etc. When one isn't seen, the other also is not seen. So these are the verses through 20 through from verse 20 through verse 22. And if you understood the meaning of these verses right now, then you can go drink and come back later. But so this is the three nature taught in these verses. One is called Henge Shoshusho, and the other is called Eta Kisho, and then Enjo Jitsho. As I have put in the notes right here, Henge Shoshusho means imaginary. Hen means like universal or universally. And ge means like calculation. And shoshu means to attach. and sho means nature. So it is kind of our nature of always attaching to our self-calculation or imaginary view. That is henge shoshusho. And etakisho is simply translated as dependent. So e means to rely on, and ta means other, and ki means to occur or arise, and sho means nature. So, everything occurs depending on others. So interdependence, that is etakisho. And then enjo jitsusho, this is translated as perfected. And en, circle, right? I don't know about the Western culture, but Indian culture or maybe Chinese too, circle represents the perfectness of everything, right? Perfectness. So en is a kind of expression of perfect nature. And then jo means to become. And then jitsu is real. And sho is nature. So this is the kind of the nature of becoming perfected and real. That is the perfected nature. And as I have put in parenthesis, imaginary, this is the view of the ordinary beings. And then enjo jitsusho is view of the Buddha, and dependent is dependent origination. So I might have shared this story before. I don't know if I did or not, but to explain the imaginary, this story is often used. So there was a man living in the mountain. One day he went to the village and came back home late. And when he reached the entrance of his house, he saw a giant snake coiling itself by the house. So he was afraid of the snakes. So he tried not to scream and ran into the house. But he was worried. What if the snake come into the house? So he could not sleep that night. So next day morning, he made up his mind, holding a club on his hand, and went outside to see if the snake is still there. Then he saw a rope, rolled up like this. So it was not a giant snake, but it was a rope. So in this story, the giant snake is expressing imaginary, right? But rope is, the word rope is also imaginary, because what we think as rope is actually made of hemp, right? So rope is actually the result of the dependent origination. So this is expressing dependent. And perfected is to see dependent thing as dependent thing, or view of the sunyata or emptiness. The only difference between ordinary being and Buddha is how we see things, imaginary or perfected. This sounds really simple, right? But this makes a huge gap between ourselves and Buddha. So this is the blueprint of Konpon Chudo of Enryakuji Temple in Mount Hiei. So Enryakuji Temple is the mother temple of Japanese Tendai school. And Enryakuji Temple is where our founder Shinran Shonin have studied and practiced for 20 years. And I had put the words entrance and the altar right here. But do you see what is the difference between our temple and this Konpon Chudo? So entrance is right here, right? So we go inside the temple, and then you notice another steps going down, right? So Actually, the altar is located on the lower level. So on the other hand, our temple, when we go inside, we have elevated stage and the altar is right there, right? So this is the picture I got online. The monk is on the lower level and conducting the service. But when we actually go into Konpon Chudo, where we stand is behind these words on the right. So right here we stand. Then, do you know what happens when we stand right here? So our eye level and Buddha's eye level are the same level. Sacramento Betsuin, if we go inside of the Betsuin, we stand the Gejin, where the pew is, right? Then Buddha's statue is a little bit higher than our eye level, right? But Konpon Chudo, when we go inside, our eye level and Buddha's eye level are the same. So I heard this is expressing the Buddha and we are seeing the same thing from the same eye level. But this lower level expresses that there are big gap between our view and Buddha's view. So it is often expressed or explained as the difference between this shore and other shore. This is this gap is expressing the difference between this shore and other shore. So Buddha and I see the same thing, but how we see is totally different because we see things using our imaginary view, right? We distinguish things and people using words and create the shape of what the word is expressing, right? The story of the man who was afraid of snakes. Snake or rope, same thing. We use words to express something. But the word itself do not express the true nature of the things. The nature of the things is that it is occurring depending on the conditions, dependent origination. So in this sense, dependent and perfected is not different, but not the same. This is the difficult point. It's not the same, but it's not the different. So regarding imaginary and perfected, I could introduce the fourth vow of Amida Buddha as an example from the Raja Sutra. So it said, if when I attain Buddhahood, the humans and devas in my land should not all be the same appearance and should be either beautiful or ugly. May I not attain the perfect enlightenment. So this is the fourth vow of Amida Buddha, taught in the Raja Sutra. And same appearance does not mean that we become like a mass-produced goods. But it goes beyond distinction, non-beauty or ugly. So I'm not the Buddha, so that I can only assume what the Buddha's view is like. But I assume the Buddha sees everything and everyone as noble life. So this is the understanding of the Kegon school, who rely on the Avatamsaka Sutra, but they say that one is all, and all is one. So Buddha's view is that there is no distinction of the self and others. Other is the self, and the self is others. So I am in you, and you are in me. This is the understanding of one is all, and all is one. Then, why Amida Buddha had to establish this vow? That is because we ordinary beings distinguish using our imaginary eyes and say that oh, this is beautiful. Oh no, this is ugly, right? So I have a lot of musical instruments behind me, but how I choose them is how the sound is beautiful or how the shape looks good, like that. I'm relying on my impressions and distinguish beautiful and ugly, good and bad. So the wisdom of the ordinary beings is called discriminative wisdom. We distinguish things and people using the words and put label on everything. So let's see here. These are one of the fretless bass guitars by Fender. And some people might know which bass guitar is more expensive. Left bass guitar is the mass-produced bass guitar, but right bass is unique one. This is actually the replica of the bass guitar which the famous bass player Jaco Pastorius played. And Jaco Pastorius was a bass guitar player, and he was a fantastic, amazing bass player. He played for Weather Report, and he played with many musicians, including Joni Mitchell and Pat Metheny. And it is difficult to choose one of the favorite music composed by Jaco Pastorius, but I like a music titled Portrait of Tracy. And since I have time, I can show you the video of me playing Portrait of Tracy. Maybe you don't hear the sound right now. Maybe I have to push this one. Yeah, I guess you hear the sound. So this is the music composed by Jaco Pastorius, and I wish I could play more like Jaco, but still, this is a beautiful piece. And Jaco used a lot of harmonics, which made the range of the bass playing wider. If we just play the real note, the bass just play like boom, 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 really low sound. But because of the harmonics, we hear kind of like high-pitched note, and it could create a really beautiful sound. And if you are really interested in Jacko's playing or portrait of Tracy, I'm sure it's available on YouTube. So you can, go on YouTube and look for a portrait of Tracy. So, even though this is a replica and not real Jacko's bass guitar, this right side bass guitar reminds us of the, unique history and life of Jaco Pastorius, right? And the Buddha's view is not to see everybody like mass-produced products, but accept uniqueness of each individual as is, and still see everything with the eyes of equality. This is the view of the Buddha, perfected. So, I often feel the distance between myself and the Buddha through this difference of the views. And it forces me to realize that I, who rely on the imaginary view, should rely on the wisdom of Buddha, who has the eyes of the perfected. So this is why the two deep mind shared by Master Shantao resonates me. Master Shantao said, deep mind is the deeply interesting mind. There are two aspects. One is to believe deeply and decidedly that you are a foolish being of karmic evil caught in birth and death, ever thinking and ever wandering in transmigration from innumerable kalpas in the past, with never a condition that would lead to emancipation. The second is to believe deeply and decidedly that Amida Buddha's 48 vows grasp sentient beings, and that allowing yourself to be carried by the power of the vow without any doubt or apprehension, you will attain birth. So this English translation is from Collected Works of Shinran. And the translation, mention like you or yourself, but in Chinese, there is no mention. So, I think Shantao is talking to himself too, so this is kind of a problem of English translation, but, it is my foolish nature to rely on the imaginary view. And that is why I should rely on wisdom of Amida Buddha and ride on the working of the name Namo Amida Butsu to attain enlightenment. So Professor Kyuki Ota, he said, unless we encounter the Buddha, we cannot understand the true self. Finite beings cannot understand its finiteness when the being is in the finiteness. Defiled being cannot understand the defiledness when the being is in the defiledness. By encountering the infinite, the finite being realizes own finiteness. By encountering the pure, the defiled beings realize own defiledness. And I thought this word is really deep. And I believe this word by Professor Ota is teaching us not to rely on the major inside of the self, but rely on the major of the Buddha. If we rely on the major of inside of the self, we never get out of the view of the self, right? It's kind of narrow view. So we need the eyes to see ourselves from outside of ourselves. And that eye is the eyes of the Buddha. So our eighth head priest, Rengyo Shongi, said something like this. Others' faults are easy to see, but difficult to realize one's own fault. Others' faults are easy to see, but difficult to realize one's own fault. So I really strongly feel that need of relying on the wisdom of Buddha to see ourselves. So, but anyway, I could also say that these three natures try to express the emptiness from various perspectives. Madhyamika, the middle way school, insisted the idea of sunyata was emptiness. everything lacks the self-nature. And because they emphasized the aspect of emptiness too much, they were leaning towards the nihilism. So Yogacara, representation-only school, tried to express the emptiness from these three natures. So now we are moving into verses 23 through 25. But these three verses are explaining three nature from the perspective of no self-nature or lacking the self-nature. So again, let's read verses 23 through 25 first, and let me explain about these verses later. So verse 23rd. 即 A 子三小、立否三無小、鉱物密知説、一切法無小. And this is my translation. Through the view of existence of this three nature establishes the view of non-existence of the three non-nature. Buddha emphasized emptiness and expounded in the Wisdom Sutra, but he was hiding the true intent that the view of existence and non-existence are one, neither different nor the same. And BDK translation. On the basis of these three natures, the threefold naturelessness is established. Therefore, the Buddha taught with a hidden intention that all dharmas are natureless. And down last house translation, always already dependent on these three natures. The three non-self natures are established. Thus, Buddha's secret intention is to explain that all dharma are without self-nature. And Ben Connolly translation, with the threefold nature is the threefold absence of self-nature. So it has been taught that all things have no self. So this is verse 23rd. And verse 24. 小即相無小、死無自念小、合有恩理善、小修が法小. And this is my English, my translation. The first of the three non-nature is the nature of the non-self nature of the figure. Next is the non-self nature of the occurrence. And lastly, the non-self nature of the true nature, which leaves the attachments to the self and the phenomena. And BDK translation. The first is naturelessness of characteristics. The next is naturelessness of self-existence. The last is the nature that results from the privation of the former, self and dharmas that are grasped. And down last house translation, the three natures are considered non-nature because the first is characterized precisely as not having self-nature. The next is without a self-originating nature. The last, due to its remoteness and detachment from the previous one's attachment to the self-nature of Atman and Dharma. And Ben Connolly translation, the imaginary is without self by definition. The other dependent does not exist by itself. The third is no self-nature that is. And lastly, the verse 25. 死小法小義、約束税信用、上行合証拠、即有識実証. And finally, we see the word yuishiki, the representation only here. And this is my translation. This non-self nature of the true nature is the supreme truth of all things. And that is the true reality, tatata itself. Always it is the true reality as is. Therefore, the true nature is how representation only is. difficult to understand. BDK translation. This is the ultimate truth of all dharmas, and is also the same as true suchness. Because it is eternally so in its nature, it is a true nature of consciousness only. And then last house translation. Ultimately, the various dharmas also precisely, truly like this, because their non-self nature is always like this. Their real nature precisely is psychosophic closure. And then Connolly translation, the complete realized nature of all phenomena, which is thusness, since it is always already thus projection only. So as you see here, the word yuishiki, this is what I translated as representation only, but it was often translated as consciousness only. So BDK translation uses consciousness only. But Dan Lasthouse uses psychosophic closure. And Ben Connolly, he uses the translation projection only. So there are various translations to this word, yuishiki. But anyway, what we sense right now, it is created through our impression stored in earlier consciousness. And now we are projecting it to the outside world. So this is what we read, previously. So the figure of what we see now, it is the result of our attachments to the impressions. So essentially, the figure of what we sense right now lacks the self nature. It is emptiness. And dependent is the result of the dependent origination. So right now, I see the monitor in front of me. Maybe you see the monitor or a tablet or smartphone or something. This monitor is created by many parts. Dependent is expressing from this aspect that the monitor exists here by many parts. That is dependent. But there is no single thing which consists a monitor. So dependent is also the non-self nature of occurrence. So lastly, the true reality appears when we leave the attachment to the substantiation. So this is the view of perfected. But if we stand on the viewpoint that the true reality is the negation of the attachments to the substantiation, then it becomes the non-self nature of the true nature. So, as you see, these verses 23 through 25 is really difficult to understand. That is why I don't have any metaphor. If I really understand, I can use metaphor to explain it to you. But I'm still trying to understand what these three non-nature means. So I cannot use any metaphor to explain it. So if you have good metaphor, then please let me know. That would really help. But according to Professor Ota, the 30 verses can be divided into 3 sections. 30 verses, whole thing. So let's see here. Figure of representation only, that is called yuishiki so. And nature of representation only is called yuishiki sho. And stages of representation only is yuishiki I. And the first one, figure of representation only, is through verse 1 through 24. And nature of representation only is verse 25. And stages of the representation only is verses 26 to 30. And nature of representation only is tata. Tata means like suchness, thusness, which is expressed as the non-self nature of the truth or perfected in these 30 verses. So representation only try to balance out the Madhyamika's attachments to emptiness through, these three natures and three non-natures. So, representation only appeared after Madhyamika. So Madhyamika started to go towards nihilism. So representation only try to kind of bring back this Madhyamika into Buddhist context. That is why we see these kind of definitions of three natures and non-three natures kind of thing. So then, how how the representation only school practice and how they progress the practices. So this is the contents of the number 3 stages of the representation only, which is verses 26 through 30. So this is the contents of the last class, which is going to happen next month. So this is what I have for today. It was probably shorter than usual, but that is because I could not think of any metaphor explaining verses 23 through 25th. But that's my limitation. So I'm sorry about it. Okay, so if you have any questions or comments, or if you want to chat, that's fine. Yeah. But I hope you got, little bit of the verses 20 through 25th.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sensei. That was awesome.
Oh, thank you.
So deep, but hearing you play the guitar and the Fender guitar reference to the mass production versus the, customized one was really good. The snake and the rope were really good analogies as well. So really helpful. The rest of it was super duper way over my head. So I will admit, I am such a little pedestrian in this world, but I really appreciate your efforts and like boiling it down to some, tangible points.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sandy.
Well, thank you for all your effort. Really appreciate it. I just hope to be, I don't even think I hope to be, I just hope to get some more salient points I can share with the 6th graders.
I'm really appreciating because I've always been much more the Madhyamika kind of school, the Nagarjuna, but I'm starting to feel the absolutely no difference. That they're saying the same thing, and when there was one point when you were talking about from the Buddha's point of view, he looks at all beings and sees nobility. Reminded me of once when I was at teaching Metta Padma. One day after Dharma school, the kids were coming by, and Andrew Matayoshi, who at that time was 9 years old, he came to me and he said, Reverend Bob, are you enlightened? I said, no, Andrew, I'm not. And he said, how do you know if you're enlightened? And so, such good questions from a 9-year-old. How do you know if you're enlightened? And I said, well, as I've been taught, if I was enlightened, then I would look around and I would see Buddhas everywhere, that everyone would be a Buddha. And now I look around and I don't see very many Buddhas, only one that's standing in front of me who's 9 years old.
Yeah, that's the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really cute. Andrew Matayoshi is a very special individual. That is one deep thinker.
When he was only 9 at the time, too.
Wow.
What a brat. What a brat.
No, what a great question. I was like, wow, that's why I never forgot it. I mean, all the kids coming through, and he stops me and says, how do you know if you're enlightened? Wow. So, yeah, He is very special.
Mhm.
He is truly. We are so lucky to have him.
Oh.
And oh gosh,
Hey,
playing
Sensei, I
harmonics
was
on your
amazed.
bass without
Wait,
with
Merce saying something.
without frets, that's amazing.
Yes, I was just going to say the same thing. I've never heard the bass guitar play those kind of notes. It's just amazing.
That's the uniqueness of Jackal's playing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it must not be easy to do it. I'm very impressed that you're able to do that too.
Thank you.
To me, I think without frets, it's impossible. It's amazing to, yeah.
Well, the line helps. So this one is the fretless, but it has the line.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, but still, that's all touch.
it's still fretless, so I can go like
Mhm.
this and sounds like interesting, but yeah. If I put my hands or finger on the line, it makes the perfect sound or perfect pitch. So yeah, that makes me easier to play. But
Sensei, you
upright,
could really stretch your hands too. I'm amazed how, I mean, that's hard.
yeah, luckily I have bigger hands. So yeah, I think I can go 13 notes on piano or something. So starting from
13 notes on the
C
piano?
to C to something. I forgot, maybe C to E or something, but yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was very good.
Thank you very much. That was a good session again.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
We appreciate you taking the time and deciphering everything down for us because it's really difficult. I can't even imagine trying to study this. But here we're the lucky ones to just be able to sit and to have you decipher everything down for us. So we really do appreciate that. Are there any other questions? Any comments?
If I can ask real quick, does Andrew still live in the area? Does anybody know?
Yeah, Andrew's attending UC Davis.
Okay. I met him during the BCS Education Award interviews, and I was very impressed with him as well. And I was hoping that he would remain involved in the church and share his thoughts with the rest of us. He was a very intelligent young man.
Yeah, I'm sure he will come back. He's just, occupied with being a college kid.
I completely understand.
I can just about guarantee that he will come back in some way, shape, or form. And if not at our church, then at some other very deserving and lucky church.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
How old is he?
Oh my goodness. You would ask me the hard question. I think he's got to be drinking age by now.
Oh.
Because he was my TA for a number of years. And I had to tread very carefully with what I said. Because he was always quick to say, well, Mrs. Tokunaga, that's not quite right. I'm like, okay, fine. Okay, fine. You lead the class then. And he was very good, very knowledgeable. And he was the one that told us that I said, yes, and the Buddha was born in India. And he goes, well, not exactly. He said, he's actually born in Nepal. I'm like, okay. Yeah. And he gave the reason why. Boundaries are political, they move around and all this kind of stuff. So Nepal is apparently, because he was busted for saying India at a BCA thing, because a kid from Nepal said, no, the Buddha is born in Nepal. So yeah.
We taught him that in Metta Padma too, so he should have known that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, again, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you again, Reverend Yuki, for such a nice session.
Oh,
And
thank you.
I'd like to ask Reverend Yuki if you wouldn't mind closing our session tonight.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Thank you everybody for joining me. So, Namo Amida Butsu.
Namo Amida.
Namo Amida Butsu.
Namo
Namo
Amida.
Namo Amida Butsu.
Namo Amida.
Namanda Butsu. Namanda.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
thank you
Reverend
very
Yuki. Thank you
much.